Hello and welcome. I hope your coffee is warm. Today we have a suggestion from Storm Dragon who sent in their deck. And I will be looking at it, seeing what we could improve, and I will choose the cards that might improve the deck. Now, if we look at the deck, there are some, I would not say glaring problems, but some definite improvements. One of those things is that there is only one board wipe. Now, we need board wipes, especially in a deck that wants to go a bit late. In a deck like Miirym Sentinel Wyrm, where you want to play big dragons and you want to copy them with your commander, you really need enough removal and control, or other forms of interaction. There are 5 pieces of removal to catch up with that, and I would say we need a bunch more. Definitely in this kind of deck. Then there are 2 pieces of direct damage, which are cards that deal direct damage to your opponent's life whenever a dragon enters the battlefield, and there are more versions of it that can really help you win games in the long run. And then there's only 1 piece of haste enabling, which you really need when you're playing any kind of big creature. You want them to get in because that is a big part of their power. Now the mana curve is a little bit wonky as well. Dragons of course are really big. They can be easily 6, 7, 8 mana because we want them to be splashy and big. But we will need to work on this mana curve a little bit, lower the average mana value of the cards a little bit as well, and I think that will definitely this deck. What will be going out? Well, one of the things I like to look for when I look at the deck for the first time is, are there cards that really don't immediately work with the game plan that seem to work with the game plan? Like Door of Destinies, a 4 mana artifact that says, well, creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. And doesn't matter how you get them basically, but we don't need our big dragons to get much bigger. They are already devastating when they can get in, so I would prefer a piece of haste enabling over Door of Destinies. Now, Magda Brazen Outlaw is a card that works great with dragons. It says sacrifice 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. But you will need to have the treasures. 5 treasures isn't too hard to get in a dragon deck, but you won't always have it. You could storm off with this thing, but you probably won't, and I think that is a reason not to run it. And then there's There and Back Again, which is a card that says 1 target creature can't block, then search your library for a mountain, and then on the 3rd chapter, after which it could have been removed pretty easily, you get a 6/6 dragon with, when it dies, this creature, or you get 14 treasure tokens. Now, you need it to die, you need to wait a long time, and then you have 14 treasure tokens with which you can do a lot in this deck, truth be told, but it takes a really long time, and there are easier ways to get your dragons out. So those I am cutting a little bit. Now, there are some dragons that I will be cutting. For example, Inferno of the Star Mounts is a 6 mana dragon with haste, with fire breathing, and an ability to deal 20 damage, but you will need a lot of mana for it. And I think, again, there are easier ways to kill your opponents. And for example, Dread Linhorn Lorm, which is a dragon for 7 mana that is just a 7/6. And for 4 mana, it could protect the creature, but I think there are easier ways to do this again. I'll be cutting some lands as well. For example, I think that lands that give you life aren't really going fast enough for us, so I think we can do better with that. For example, I will be cutting some forms of removal like Shower of Arrows, a 3 mana one that destroys an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Of course, we have a bunch of creatures with flying, but we don't have to limit ourselves to something like that. I will show you some better ones. And then there are some pieces of ramp that I don't think really fit in this deck, weirdly enough. The Orbs of Dragonkind, for example, they add 1 mana and they are a 3 mana rock. And I think we can get a way better rate of ramp for this. And I also think that these rocks should be about these mana rocks should be about the amount of mana they create, and not, for example, about scrying 2 whenever you cast a dragon with it. It will just mean that you probably scry 2 every turn for 3 mana. And I think the ramp is so much more important that I would love to shave off 1 mana. Same with Replicating Ring, a 3 mana artifact that creates a mana of 1 color, and after 8 upkeep, or 8 upkeeps, you get to duplicate the ring, but that almost never happens. So Replicating Ring in this deck is a little bit dangerous, let's say. Now what's going in? We have ways to give your creatures haste, like Tamara Ascendancy fits in this deck color-wise, gives your creatures haste. We love it. And whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, you draw a card. And I love ways or cards that will give you multiple themes that we need, like card draw and giving haste, because then we can shave off some other cards, because this thing does both the things we really need. Lightning Greaves, great ability because it also protects a creature, so again 2 rolls. Rhythm of the Wild also protects your creatures and could give you all of your creatures haste, and when they already have haste you can give them a +1 counter, or if you don't need the haste, for example. Now there are some dragons that I would really like to include, so I've pulled out a lot of dragons and turned some of them back in. Like Ganax, the Astral Hunter, a 5 mana dragon that says whenever it or another dragon enters the battlefield, create a treasure. I really love this ability because it immediately gives you the treasure, and it can make you storm off pretty easily with your commander that doubles the dragons. For example, this one is 5 mana and will give you back 2 treasures, so that goes off really quickly. Haragast, Erupting Nullkite, is a 9 mana dragon. You would say way too expensive. Yes, it does increase our mana count, but it has Emerge 8, meaning that you can sacrifice a big creature to reduce that Emerge cost, and then play Haragast, and it gives all of your other creatures Emerge as well. The Emerge cost will be equal to their mana cost, so no little reduction in mana, but it is really easy to sacrifice a big dragon and get a big dragon back for it. And as we will be doubling the dragons, this will be great because there will be a token left after you sacrifice the real version. Steel Hellkite, also a really great dragon. For one, it also has the fire breathing ability, I guess, but way turned down. But more importantly, it says X, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. We need haste for this creature to really work, but it will be also a small board, a really great board wipe against your opponents when you really need it. Then I have a really important one for dragons, which is 1, removal, but 2, direct damage. Warstorm Surge, for example, really expensive enchantment, but it says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. As we have big powered creatures, we really love this enchantment because we can very easily deal with our opponents, especially when giving haste or double the power of dragons after it. And it's a way to finish your opponents quickly, which is the best way. Dragon Tempest, 2 mana, and says whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to target player, where X is the number of dragons you control. So you will need a number of dragons, which is going wide, which we aren't really good at usually, but it will deal a bunch of dragons. It will deal a bunch of damage to your opponents as well. And it says whenever a creature with flying, which most dragons have, enters the battlefield, it gains haste. So it is also a haste enabler. Spit Flame is a 3 mana removal spell sort of that deals 4 damage to a target creature, which you can get back whenever you have a dragon enter the battlefield under your control, and that will happen a lot in this deck. Also, we needed board wipes. This was something we were really missing. Blasphemous Act is always a great one. Chain Reaction I think is great in this deck, both dealing a bunch of damage to all creatures. And Glove's Will is an X spell where the X dictates how much damage you will be doing to all creatures without flying. Hopefully you will have all flying dragons on the battlefield, and only your opponent's creatures will die after this board wipe, and you will have a bunch left. Or you could use the X spell to destroy artifacts and enchantments, which is also sometimes necessary, as I have gotten a bunch of those removal spells out of the deck. Now we also need ramp. I think this is a really ramp heavy deck, so cards like Rampant Growth are really important because you need to start early with that ramp, and I think again shaving off 1 mana of the cost is worth it. We have Traverse the Outlands, which is a 5 mana one that says search your library for up to X basic lands, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You need to test with this because you will need 1 dragon out, so if you are not consistently doing that before you have Traverse the Outlands in your hand, I think this is not really worth it. Herald's Horn is a 3 mana one that is worth it, definitely. It says choose dragons. Creatures, dragons you cost 1 less to cast, and at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a dragon, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. So card draw and cost reduction. So again, double duty, which I really love. One newer theme I am adding is making more copies. So it is a win more strategy, but one that will be great to play and will be a lot of fun. So for example, Panharmonicon, which has been reprinted, I think, seems really cheap for the card at this moment. It says, if an artifact or creature, which is important to us right now, entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So you will be getting 2 copies from your commander. Virtue of Knowledge is a 5 mana enchantment that says basically the same but for all permanents. But this time, also entering the battlefield. And for 2 mana, you could copy an activated or triggered ability already. And Life Finds a Way, which is a cool one. It is a 3 mana enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, populate. This does mean that you will need a token onto the battlefield already, but populating these tokens is really good because they are big dragons that you would love to double. And you could double the dragon that you love or need at this moment. Next up is ways to cheat in your dragons. And this is the last theme I will be talking about before going to the stats. Smuggler's Surprise is a great one. I love these spree cards because they do so much. It's a 1 mana card at first, but then you will have to pay the additional costs for the modes. The most important one here is the 5 mana one, so the card will be 6 in total. You may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Our cards are probably already 6 mana, and we will love to put those big cards onto the battlefield for cheaper. But you could also do more. 2 mana one says mill 4 cards. You may put up to 2 creature cards or lands from among the milled cards into your hand, so a sort of card draw. And the 1 creatures you control with power 4 or greater, almost all of them, gain Hex, prevent indestructible until end of turn. So it's also a 2 protection spell. Monster Manual, the most important part is for 2 mana you can tap the 4 mana artifact to put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, and sneak attack 4 mana again, and for 1 mana you may put a creature card to the battlefield, but you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. It also gets haste though, so you will be able to use the card already. Next up, I will want to show you, we have lowered the mana value a little bit. We have added a 9 mana card, 2 actually. But those are easier to cast for us, as I have explained before. So I really think we have lowered the mana curve a bit more than this. But you can see there are way more in the 2 and 3 slots, way more in the 4 slot, and a bit less in the 6 and 7 mana slots. And we have gotten way more categories. I'd ask how we get so many more. That's because we have a bunch of cards which have 2 roles. So board wipes gotten way more, which is really important. We have more direct damage, which I think is really important. We have less dragons and less lands, which I would say we need, but we don't need that many in a dragons deck. In a tribal deck, I would say you need 20 to 30 cards of that certain typal decks. But in a dragons deck, you have big creatures. So you will need a little bit less of those creatures. But you are probably already content when you have 5 dragons onto the battlefield. Now we have way more haste enablers, which I think is important. More cards that help us get more copies. A bit more removal. I think better removal as well. More protection, and we have the new beam of sneaking cards out onto the battlefield. And that was it for this deck improvement. I would love to know what you think of it, and if you have tested it, how it worked. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching, sending in the deck as well. Thank you for that. Anyone can do this, by the way, just comment down below. And I wish you a very nice day. Bye.